This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now.
I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent.
When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation.
I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless.
Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by a friend of the team, Romaney, who is Group CFO of bolttech. How are you?
Hi, Alex. I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for having me. Really pleased to be here.
No, thank you. And we've scheduled this, and we've also utilised your time with Real Tech Women, so you've been really generous. So I really appreciate you coming on. You know, if anyone goes back over some of that content, they know exactly who you were. But I always think it's good to start with the who are you and who are bolttech, just for those people that have been hiding under a rock for the last few years.
You've probably seen bolttech's name pretty extensively the last few years. I mean, I'll start with me. I'm the Group CFO, as you already mentioned. I joined bolttech in February 2022. So it's been about 2.5 years since I've been in the role. And then prior to that, my entire career has been with big multinational companies. I've always been in the insurance space, both life and GI. But prior to that, 12 years with AIG and other names that you would recognize, Swiss Re, GE Capital. I qualified with EY. So really gone from a big global corporate environment into a startup environment, which is now, you know, what I would characterize as a scale up, but big change, but obviously fantastic grounding in the insurance industry prior to joining bolttech, because, you know, I worked with some institutions that are just some of the best in existence, and it's just an amazing way to learn. So it's been a real journey the last 2.5 years. bolttech, as a lot of people will be familiar, at least with the name, you may have heard of us. We're a really fast-growing international insurtech. We're a B2B business, so essentially what we do, B2B2C, we work with other business partners to help them distribute insurance and protection products to their customers through their customer journeys. And we bring together those distribution partners and insurance carriers and protection providers who are manufacturing those products. Basically, our position in that ecosystem is to provide the technology to be able to do that really quickly, really easily, in a sort of fast, innovative way, which kind of brings customers, you know, together to be able to protect the things that they need protected. We launched in 2020, so right as COVID was actually kicking in, but our business has been online and virtual from the get-go by design. So probably slightly different to a lot of other companies out there. Our HQ is in Singapore. We are now in 35 plus markets worldwide across North America, Asia, Europe, Africa. So ever expanding, and globally, our insurance ecosystem. So our tech connects more than 700 distribution partners with more than 230 insurance providers, and we've got more than sort of 6,000 product and territory configurations in there. So our main role is to basically bring different participants in the insurance industry together to provide an ecosystem that allows much easier, simpler and wider distribution of protection products.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? You're saying 2020 launch, and that some of those numbers are staggering, like 35 markets, 6,000 products. And yeah, it's the scale and the speed of the scale that I find fascinating, because, yeah, very much you joined a startup and now absolutely in that scale up bracket. I always think it's interesting reflecting touching on the names and just going off book slightly here. I always find it fascinating when we talk about hiring talent into the insurtech industry. There was definitely this theme of being quite sort of almost derogatory about a lot of the big names in insurance. And I'm like, they're big for a reason. The training's phenomenal. Like, they're very good at doing the things that they do, like AIG, Swiss Re. It's like, because I reflect on my own journey. You get a little bit of that in my world, is that I worked for Hayes, and when it was my first job in recruitment, it's the big PLC listed recruitment business. And I was like, it's like joining the military. Like, they know how to create people to do the job. So the core training there is very, very key. And obviously I worked for a big RSM before then, but AIG, Swiss Re, all of these kind of names is just where you get the talent. But I think that's died off a bit now, but do you remember that kind of being a bit of the thing that people are almost dismissive of people from the big names being able to cut it in a kind of insurtech environment, certainly in that startup scale-up space?
Yeah, I do think that if I think back quite a few years, it was, maybe it was a little bit popular for a while to be sort of disparaging about, to use that sort of broader umbrella term, incumbents. But I think you make a really good point, which is that these companies, have been really successful. They won't have had a sort of a straight line of problem-free performance, but what company that's been around for 100 years or more has, they've all had to go through massive amounts of change and strategic pivots. But firstly, they've been incredibly good and continue to be incredibly good at what they do. And secondly, they're still around, and so there's a lot of companies, that have had great ideas and sort of just didn't make it. And in fact, I think the majority of companies don't. So I think maybe it was popular for a while to kind of talk in that way. But I think one of the things that we have at bolttech, because of the mixture and diversity of our experience, particularly with people who, like myself, like Rob, our CEO, and a number of other members of the team, come from an insurance environment, we actually understand what the insurance companies are really, really good at, and, innovating around just coverage, new risks, how to price for risk, particularly when, you don't have a sort of perfect set of data, is an incredibly technical, difficult thing to do. And the insurance companies are unbelievable at it. But coming from that background, knowing what are the real problems and things that they're trying to solve for, and most importantly, where they are probably not the best organization to solve for it, or they can't necessarily do it on their own, that's where the opportunity lies, I think, for insurtech. And that's why we have always been really clear that, bolttech is an enabler. We're not looking to come in and sort of disrupt the industry and start, trying to sort of compete for the existing market. What we're trying to do is actually enable solving for some of those problems, particularly when it comes down to bringing customers together with the insurance products that they need, but through a sort of a customer experience journey that is already there. A lot of the challenges with distribution in insurance is that there's just this sort of constant proliferation of distribution channels, but people don't kind of get up in the morning thinking like, I'm really looking forward to buying my insurance today. So if you've already got, a mechanism through which to help them find what they need, particularly where they're already either they're buying the asset that it is that they want to then have insured, or there is another sort of adjacent experience that they're currently going through that also allows them to address some of that need. That's what we enable. And what that does is that it doesn't necessarily change, the flow of how people buy insurance. Sometimes, and often what it does is it actually brings them coverage that they would otherwise not have got, or it brings it to them in a way that is really easy and quick and seamless and much more the kind of experience that they want to have, rather than having to, go off and spend a whole lot of time and sort of separate kind of admin to do it. So I think it is about the customer experience, and particularly the customer experience of those distribution partners that we partner with, but it also just brings a whole lot of new distribution to those insurance carriers that, because of their business models, they either may not access it at all, or it allows them to do it in a really efficient way. So that's kind of how we see it. But I think the other point you make is, perhaps the same point that you make is, part of this is actually just having a really deep understanding about what you are good at and what your role should be in the ecosystem versus what might be better solved through a partnership with a company like bolttech. And I know that many companies, whether they're insurance carriers or others, will have, particularly the big scale ones, will have been through experiences where they've invested an enormous amount of their own capital in technology because they're trying to solve the problem themselves. When, if you looked back, you would probably look at it slightly differently. And certainly now, one of the solutions that would be better is to partner with a company like bolttech, because this is what we do. It's much more effective. And then you can concentrate on what you're good at. Let us do the technology piece, and then everyone, is better off. So we have a real ecosystem approach to this, and we just want to be a technology enabled important piece of that ecosystem.
Because I was going to ask you an incredibly broad question, but I think you've answered a lot of it just there. Just like that's why bolttech's been specifically successful, because there's lots of people competing in this space. There's lots of people that have been funded, some at quite scale as well, and I don't think anyone's quite hit the speed of growth, the amount of different markets that you have. And I just kind of wanted to zero in on why specifically that is, but it feels to me that you answered a lot of it there, which was one, understanding the insurance ecosystem incredibly well because of the makeup of the team, but secondly, it's like you have a very clear idea of where you play. Like, this is the bit that we're solving for, and I think some of it's been people have tried to go upstream and downstream of that whilst trying to solve for the same point. I don't know if you think that's fair, but it seems quite defined, and we know our role within this ecosystem. Do you think that's the key?
I think that's one of them. So I think that having that clarity of exactly the way you just described of, what our ambition has always been to enable the industry to transform itself and to play a role in making it easier to simplify how people and businesses can access insurance. So that's always been our kind of clear ambition. And we're not we've never really strayed away from that ambition. So I think that clarity is one piece of success. I think probably the second is just relationships. You've got in any business, it's always about relationships. But I think particularly if you're trying to bring, different participants together, building and maintaining strong relationships and understanding what it is that company, whether it's on the sort of insurer side or whether it's on the distribution side, is what is their strategy and what are they trying to do and what are they trying to do with their customers, so that you can make sure you bring the right solutions is the second one. I think we've really invested a lot in making sure we've got the kind of people who understand how to do that really well. I think the third is, I would say this because I'm a CFO, but one of the things I noticed was we have had a pretty consistent set of goals around financial fundamentals, from the very beginning. And one of the things that can happen, particularly when you're in a company that is needing to kind of raise funds at different stages and is consuming capital and consuming cash, is that balance between growth and profitability. And you did see this sort of phenomenon in 2020, 21, and a little bit into the beginning of 22, where in the market environment from an investor perspective was very much growth, growth at all at top of the priority list, and not so much focus on profitability. That shifted quite dramatically between 22 and 23, and then kind of into this year. And so a lot of companies then had to pivot from their sort of how they were measuring their financial performance towards, away from just growth at any cost, towards, okay, how are we actually, and over what timeline are we going to make this thing profitable? And I think from the very beginning, we've always had both in mind. And so we didn't change our financial performance path and our ambition for that financial performance really at all. Obviously the numbers change, but the fundamentals of how we look at growth versus profitability were always there. And I think that has really, really put us in a strong position. And I think the final thing is you talked about people and you talked about their sort of different perceptions, whether that's about big companies or otherwise. One of the differences, I think, with bolttech is that, in order to have a really successful insurtech, you need people who understand the insurance industry. But sometimes those of us who come from that background, we can almost understand it too well. And it's hard to get out of your own way because you've got just a few, in my case, a few decades of thinking. And it's quite hard to sort of unpick that. On the other side, you've got technology people and tech people who are true sort of innovators and will always come at a problem in a certain mindset. But if they don't understand the complexity of how the insurance industry operates, they hit barriers very quickly and don't really know necessarily how to navigate those barriers. So one of bolttech's successes has been that we have both, and we've always been very conscious of making sure that we've got a good balance between, real sort of dyed-in-the-wool technology entrepreneurs, innovators, high quality engineers, everything you need on the tech side to build a really value accretive tech business, but also making sure that we've got the insurance knowledge that's going to allow us to navigate the complexity of both the distribution partner and the insurance carrier side, because you need all those things. And then you need those people to work together. So you've got to create a culture where those two groups are able to speak a common language, work with each other, solve problems, and really understand that actually the benefit is not because, tech is better than insurance or insurance is better than tech. It's actually the sum of the parts is greater. And I think we've created a culture around that has made a really effective way for, people with different backgrounds and experience to work together. That's been critical to our success.
Yeah. There's an incredible culture around the business. And we were talking just before we hit record. I mean, I've just come back from ITC and there's a very big bolttech presence there. And it is a really diverse group, but everyone's pulling together and you can just sense the camaraderie. And that's it's a tangible, intangible. You sort of see it when you see it, but sometimes you kind of can't. And it doesn't always show itself in the same way. You've got a very energetic leadership team, and I think you kind of see that energy as it filters down. But then there's other businesses that we work with that's just not their style, but they're successful. But it's a different style, but it's very tangible that you can see that. I wanted to kind of like follow on from particularly your CFO role. You did a talk with us before, and I found it fascinating about data points and kind of what it takes to be success. But something about the maturity of the business now, how does that impact decision making? And kind of, I wanted to understand what are the decisions that have the longest lead time? What are the things that really get in the way? Because that must change over the time as you're scaling.
Yeah, I think it's actually the point you make about the team is an important ingredient, to the decision making question, right? Because what do diverse teams bring? They bring different experiences, backgrounds, knowledge, cultural context, all of those things. And I think that's true. It starts at the top, right? So we have a really diverse exco. So even our executive committee we're truly global. We're spread all over the world. We have a kind of cadence of when at specific points we physically get together. And so we have a way of working together, but even right at the top, our executive team is extremely diverse, and that is perpetuated, all the way through the organization. But one of the things that comes with that is when you have different experience and different backgrounds, you're going to get different opinions. And so you've got to figure out, it's good, right? It's a sort of, I wouldn't call it conflict, but it can be conflict sometimes, but it's a way of like, how do you sort of harness all of that and have enough of a way of working and making decisions that allows for the debate, but then also once you're aligned, and you've made a decision, then you move, right? And that is very much part of bolttech's culture. So we have a lot of debate, I can tell you, whether it's at the top level or even down to teams on the ground working on a very specific account about, whether to go left or right. That takes place every day, throughout the organization. But one thing that is true is that you have the debate, but then you decide and the decision is clear, and then everyone's on the bus and that's what you're doing. Even if it wasn't the thing that was your preference, that commitment so that you can then move forward is really important. So if I bring it back to your question about like, how does decision making, how is it impacted? I'd say that the way that we do that, so what I just described in terms of the, debate, bring different views, get it all on the table, open communication, everyone has a voice, listen, then decide, align, and then move. That's not different. And, whether you're at sort of startup phase or whether you're at scale up phase, which we now are, I'd say that all remains, a way that we will work. What changes is what it is that you're making decisions about. So obviously the things that are closer to market need more delicate treatment because there's no one size fits all solution. So we're very cautious about the closer it is to a market or to a distribution partner, the more careful we need to be to make sure that we're not, putting a sort of simple, easy kind of solution over something that needs a bit of customization. So generally the closer to market, not one size fits all, but different markets are going to have different maturity levels and will need different solutions. And we continue to respect that. What happens as a maturing business is that you've got to have a stronger emphasis on scalability and efficiency, and starting to get some of the benefits of your size and your growing size to look at, okay, making sure that the technology that we're building, whilst it continues to be invested in and innovated, and there's lots of new things, being really clear about where are we going to test something and it's a test and sort of fail situation and we kind of completely accept that, versus where are we building something that we know is going to be core and must be scalable and therefore, may require a different set of decisions. So that's one example, because we do need to be able to scale it. And then I think the second area is making sure that you're sort of transforming into an efficient enterprise overall. And, when you're moving into new markets, and if you're doing that organically and you're building it off your kind of current infrastructure, that's relatively easier to do. If you've done an acquisition, and I know you're probably going to ask me about that, that's obviously a different set of decisions that need to be made, but it's more around scalability and efficiency where it changes. But we spend a lot of time making sure that we deeply understand the consequences of the trade-off that we're making, so that we don't feel good about ourselves, having a sort of a nice, efficient, what looks like a standardized operation is actually really disrupting what we're trying to deliver at the front end. And I think that's always the challenge.
Yeah, God, that was really resonating for me then. That last bit was, we tried to standardize a load of operational procedure and then we suddenly realized it was kind of getting in the way. Some of it was just a bad decision, because, and look, we're a very small business, it's a very different business problem, but I do think you can get to process and not allow yourself enough maneuverability around like different challenges and opportunities as well, particularly probably when we talk about this next question, which yes, you're very right. I am going to ask you a question about acquisition, because I think the scale of the funding, the scale of the business, the speed of aggression of growth has kind of meant that acquisition is a natural kind of part of that. But I suppose my first question on that is just like, how do you ensure that like acquired legacy doesn't slow you down? I mean, and I'm always cautious with legacy, because as soon as you start a business, there's legacy being created the whole way through. But acquisitions tend to have more kind of a legacy impact, because you're kind of trying to bolt in different technology, products, operating models, perspectives. So yeah, how do you ensure that doesn't slow you down?
Yeah, and we have grown, both organically and inorganically, really successfully. So we've got both examples. But I think firstly you got to bring it back to, with M&A, we are really deliberate about where and when and for what reason we're expanding our operation. So to give an example, we don't have a map of the world that we're just putting sort of flags in so that we can now say we're in, country X. Typically, the way that we'll assess it is if we're going into a new market, it's usually for one of two reasons. Either we've identified a strategically important market, and we believe we've got product and tech that is going to really enable that market in itself. And that can be about just accessibility to financial products. For example, if you're talking about more emerging markets type countries. So that's one thing. And then secondly is we typically don't go into any markets without a distribution partner. Usually when we go into a market, it's because we've got a distribution partner commitment and we have planned for it together, or we've had a really successful relationship in another region or another set of countries. And that distribution partner has said to us, we love what we've done here together. Please go into these countries with us so that we can do what we've done with you here in these new markets. And that's how we'll launch in a market. And what that gives you is it just gives you a bit of momentum so that, you're not starting with a blank sheet of paper and consuming a whole lot of capital and then trying to work it out. It's actually, there's a really good strategic reason. And that's always going to get you, off on the right foot. I think the second thing is, when I talk about M&A, it's the same thing. So being really clear about what that company is bringing and what it isn't. Typically, because our technology is so strong, what we're really looking for is other reasons. So whether that is, real product expertise in a certain industry sector of distribution partners, or it's in markets that perhaps we haven't expanded into yet, or there's a different capability there that may even be something that we already have but haven't scaled and we think that they're doing it better. So there's usually a really specific reason why there's been an acquisition. And I think that part of the decision around, okay, so what do? You need to kind of know roughly beforehand, which elements of that business are actually going to prevail and you're going to scale them, and which ones you're going to bring together. And then so much of it, Alex, and probably the most important thing is about timing. It's not just about making the decision about what to do, it's about when. And so that quite often comes back, unfortunately for everyone else, but to me, which is looking at, okay, where are we, on our financial trajectory, whether that's growth, profitability, cash consumption, what's our sort of envelope of what we can afford to do when, and then what makes the most sense, and then you prioritize it. It's not simple, but the concept of that is simple, and you have to stay true to it. And then that's about deciding, which thing is more important. So that's how, we've always addressed it. Obviously, it comes with more complexity as you get bigger and you've got more markets. However, that it also means there's more opportunity there. And what you find is when you've done really good acquisitions, which we have, we've had really successful experience with acquisitions in, everywhere from Singapore, in Europe with a company called iSurance. We did a big acquisition last year of a company called Digital Care in Poland, which is fantastic, very similar culture to bolttech. So it's actually been a great kind of really got momentum now that we're working together. And I think, if you have that, the momentum that you get out of the result of the acquisition will actually provide some fuel, for doing what you need to do to bring the businesses together properly at the back end. So that's how, that's been our experience so far. And we're just trying to, continue to do that as successfully as we can.
Yeah, I mean, the Polish acquisition I just saw actually just got rebranded as that bolttech into
bolttech
Europe
Poland.
as well. Yeah, bolttech
Yes.
Poland. Yeah, as I say,
It is.
Great and I
team
thought that
there.
was, yeah. I suppose might be massively oversimplifying, but acquisitions is just like making good hires. Right? If you get the right hire, pick the right one, the speed to that person being up and running is is quicker, and it's like right, picking the right partners and picking the right acquisition. So yeah, like not the flags on a map thing, because I think everyone's guilty of that. It's like everyone has to get out their own ego as well. Like hiring for the sake of hiring, growth at all costs is quite attractive in terms of like, oh, to demonstrate you're doing well, rather than kind of actually making that profitable strategic growth. Because we all like to think we're rational actors, but we're not as much as we might like to think we are.
Yeah, and you're a product of your experience, right? And I think there's
Yeah.
just so many of us who have probably made those mistakes, and we know what they look like, and we know what it means in the end, and it's really painful. If you do make those kinds of decisions and they prove not to be the right decisions, dealing with that is not fun, for anyone. So, I think we've got enough experience, with that to know that the right answer is to do it this way, because in the end, if it's not the right thing, you're going to have to clean it up. And we don't want to, no one wants to be doing that. We want to make sure we do it right from the beginning.
Bad decisions are much more time consuming than taking the time to make the right decision in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
Almost always. I'm really conscious of time, and we're probably over time now. But I didn't want to let you go without talking about the kind of vision for bolttech and like what's the future hold, because I almost want to know what's the end goal. I'm sure there are multiple end goals and they change over time slightly. But what is that big vision?
Well, I mean, ultimately, we want to be a really big part of the insurance and protection ecosystem going forward, and we believe our technology is the tech that can best enable the industry globally to connect, ultimately the population with things that they want to protect. And so our vision is to be that participant in that ecosystem. So that means, I guess we think about it in a few different ways. I think the first is that it's a partnership mindset. We come at this with, we're an enabler. We want to partner with everyone. So we have a real partnership mindset, and we want to just build, as many connections, not only with ourselves and other participants, but those participants with each other. Because our fundamental belief is that in the end, it's each of those specialists that are excellent at what they do, working together with all the other participants in the industry that are going to unlock and kind of help fill that protection gap, particularly with all the risks that we know are on the horizon. I think the second thing is just continuing to constantly embrace technology. It won't surprise you that we are really excited about and very active in, the potential for AI. It's going to disrupt everything. That is not a controversial statement to make. I think it's probably the view held by most people. And that is certainly true of us. So trying to find a way that builds in, AI that is a real win-win, for our partners, their customers, the insurance carriers. But then finally, and again, I'm the CFO, so I get to say this, but it's just making sure we stay true, to the financial fundamentals. And part of the reason is not just to create, value and create, uplift for our investors and for our employees and our partners and the insurance industry. I think just increasingly, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you've got to be able to demonstrate, to the broader population what it is that you are bringing, that is making things better. And I think it's sort of incumbent on every company that is thinking about their role, how they're building a sustainable business, what contribution they're making, to all of those markets where, they are participating, and that is, overall a positive for everyone. And so that's how we see ourselves as being kind of central to that ecosystem. And I'm looking forward to continuing to grow, and you'll see more of us, I'm sure.
Well, you're at every single conference I ever go to en masse as well. So which I love, by the way. And as I said before, I'm still working on getting some of those trainers. So we'll have to see where that goes. Romaney, thank you so much. You're always so generous with your time, and your insights are so welcome. I think particularly it's really nice to hear from a CFO of your sort of experience, and then kind of in this scaling environment, because yeah, as you rightly said, I think over the last couple of years, some of that thinking got a bit lost. And it was like, oh no, growth. We don't care about fundamentals. And I think bringing it back to fundamentals is interesting for any business in any sector. You know, I had so many takeaways from the last time we spoke that we've implemented internally for us. So yeah, no,
Oh, great. That's
yeah, no,
wonderful.
we have. We've got like we've got less metrics. We've simplified our metrics and said this one
Oh,
matters,
bravo.
these don't. So there we go. Thank you so much, personally and professionally.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear, Alex. Thanks very much. It's great to talk to you. Absolute pleasure, as always. And yeah, thanks for giving me the time as well.
Thank you.